What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we are here with David and Marcelo of Sullen. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you for having us, man. It's really cool to be
Yeah,
here.
yeah. In case you all couldn't tell by my review of the album Nodus Tollens Act I, Oblivion, I was really amazed by it. I stand very strong behind the statement, the best prog metal album since Blackwater Park by Opeth.
Wow.
Like I,
Jeez.
Wow, that's something. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, man.
yeah.
It really means a lot.
Anytime, anytime. I really want to know like what the thought process was going into the making of this. Was there like a preconceived idea of how you wanted Act One Oblivion to sound like? Was there like a lot of improvising involved? How did this album really see the light of day?
Okay. Gonna start then. Then David can add his approach to it, because the writing process of this first part of Nodus Tollens, it started like in I think the beginning of 2016. I think right after the release of our first album with a whole lineup, the post-human one. And since then, since the band wasn't that active on the live department, I decided to bring things forward and start to compose, to write most of the stuff during that period. So I think like by 2017, I had like almost every part of or every segment of the songs, the structure of the songs that compose this particular release. So it was like a kind of a build-up process. Then came David in 2018, and then we started working like restlessly
Yeah.
over the vocal department and all that kind of stuff with him in the band. Until then, I think everything was like all instrumental. And just after that, we decided to work a little bit more focused on the vocals department. If
Yeah.
David wants to add something to that.
Yeah, it was really interesting when we started working together for this record. Marcelo already had a very intense material done. There was a lot of things. Actually, practically every song was already structured and composed and arranged and everything. And it was a blast to hear all this result, everything that he's been doing throughout all the years. And it really allowed my imagination in terms of vocal, vocal lines and melodies. It really sparked my imagination to, okay, how can I get my voice in here? And he also helped me with that, because Marcelo had a very clear idea of what he wanted for most of the songs. In some songs, I helped him a little bit, like, okay, can I try this and can I try that? And there was a very interesting symbiotic approach to it. Marcelo is, as you can tell from the record, he's hugely creative. His mind is completely off the charts in every single direction. And it was really easy for me to get into his mindset and to understand his ideas, even though it wasn't easy to record it in some particular sets, because Sullen has a different musical approach to everything that I've done before, which was a very clear departure from everything that I've ever done. And that's also something that Marcelo told me in the beginning: forget everything that you've done before, and this is a completely different thing. And it's true. So when he showed me those songs, I started to listen to them periodically, trying to get the vibe of this whole thing. And I started to have some ideas, and I realized how interesting it would be if we could get these songs connected somehow. Like, there is this sort of dark aura, but also a very sensitive philosophical approach to some parts that I was really thinking, how can we make this even more interesting and deep, get into a different level of depth by writing about something that we can connect with in a very humane level, but also that would be very interesting for people on the other side, people who are listening to the record, to connect with, but not in a direct way, in more kind of like a subtle way. And that's when we started to have some lyrical concepts. And I approached him with the idea of getting one of the terms that John Koenig defined for his dictionary of obscure sorrows, the Nodus Tollens. I really love that concept, and I gave it to Marcel, like, hey, how about this? Maybe we should use this as a plot in a sort of way, which is kind of ironic because the Nodus Tollens term actually indicates that you lose sense of the plot and have to fight through to get back into, the real sense of, well, in this case, living. And that's how we got started, like shooting ideas to one another, and we have a very good understanding of each other's ideas and mindsets, and we got along right from the get-go. It was amazing.
And I think
You were saying, I just wanted to say that, like, I thought that, like, this album was fairly experimental, and in terms of, like a song like The Prodigal Son, going from that to a track like Soul Interrupted to Memento to Human to The After, it seems like there was many different vibes. So it's interesting how there was kind of like an underlying concept, because every time I think of like an underlying concept behind an album, I do think that the sound kind of has to be fairly consistent and has to kind of have like a flow throughout it. So like it almost seems like did this concept come beforehand, or you mentioned that you had to like hear the music before lyrics or an idea was really incorporated, right?
I think we were in a state during that period, uh, uh, both me and David, where we were writing about some really deep stuff that we're like thinking about like each and every day. David was also like having a troubled time, some troubled periods, and so I think that the music and the lyrics themselves were like his escape from reality. So I think the vibe on this album throughout is like really dark for that aspect exactly. But
Yeah.
even so, I think we propose something that begins with a kind of statement, and then we're developing it just to reach a point when we try to get some resolve for everything. And that's why it was so important for me and him to like talk and have like 2 to 3 hours phone calls, just to discuss some ideas, to talk about life, to talk about meanings. I don't know. That was a lot of stuff to deal with, and I think the album itself, lyrically speaking, conceptually speaking, translates a lot of that. The music itself, it's always like in this kind of gray area, because when I usually envision some I don't know, some concept, some musical concept that I want to develop, I usually think about images, specific images, or backgrounds, or I don't know, like atmospheres, and I try to write music based on that. And I think my approach to it's not always like the brightest of things, nor the darkest. It's always like in between. It's always like here, thoughtful, like introspective. I like that stuff a lot, And I think David works that way also
And
most
you
of the time.
and you mentioned that this material was worked on since 2016 in a way, which is strange to think that like I was still in college when you started working on this material. You started working on this before Heavy New York even existed. So did these songs obviously change a lot over a span of time? And David, you coming to the mix also kind of brought some new things to the original compositions as well, right?
Well, the songs were very much very well defined by then. By when Marcelo sent the work that he has been doing throughout the years. Of course, there were changes. There were some tunes. I don't know how to say this. Tuning. He tuned the songs a little bit, changed a few things, made some arrangements here and there. There were a lot of improvements. What happened essentially when we got together to work on these songs was that they actually evolved into something completely different, but keeping that same aura. So yeah, I mean, like he was saying, like Marcelo was saying just a few moments ago, there is this very gray area on these songs, and you can actually feel it as they flow through the record, both from Act One and Act Two, which we'll release also later on. There is this sort of interesting depiction of time, if you can say so. Like, you know that music as an art form is intemporal, right? So, for example, even today, if you turn on your radio, you hear Queen, like from 1980s, and it's still a huge success, and everybody loves it because those compositions, they stood the test of time. And I feel the same way with these songs. Like, even though the conception of the songs, the genesis, if we can say so, of these compositions started in 2016, and they got through time, Marcelo got into a very nice spot. By the time he sent those songs to me, it was in 2018, wasn't it, when you sent those to me? And they were already pretty much very similar to what you hear now on the record. Of course, there were changes. But yeah, it's interesting to see how they evolved from those initial demos to now the beast that they are. At least I think they sound beastly. And it's interesting because you can see those bright moments in some songs which are really very smoothing and very beautiful. And then you have those very heavy and intense parts which they work together like clockwork. I think it's the way that our music flows quite naturally and gracefully, if I can say so. Like these contrasts, they live together because there is no light without darkness, right? So we try to pick up these elements, like the light side of our music and the dark side of our music, and mix them together and create this sort of tense and intense spectrum of music.
Mm-hmm. Do you want the music can Sullen's music be open to interpretation, or being that you really went in depth with this concept that I think is important to demonstrate and that I think can resonate with people as well? Do you want the listener to maybe kind of put themselves in your shoes in a way and maybe see things from your point of view?
I think that is up to each one, really, because the thing is, even though there is this concept, of the Nodus Tollens, of you losing the plot and sense of your life, and like Marcelo said a few moments ago, I was going through a very rough phase when I wrote some of those lyrics, and when I sang some of these songs, they were pretty much cathartic in a way. And I think that you can, as a listener, we try not to set any sort of rule, like if you listen to our songs, you have to be in this mind state, or you have to think this or think that. I think it's pretty much open to interpretation, of course. There are specific mindsets for each of the songs, right? Like each song deals with a different subject, but even still, you can have a song that talks about, for example, Acurante Movebo, which is a song that speaks about a struggle, an internal struggle, and you are trying to overcome this. You acknowledge it, and you're trying to escape from hell in a sort of way. Like if you can't.
Yeah, and I totally butchered the pronunciation of that song too, and I do apologize for it.
Don't worry. It's I don't think there's really, now that you mention it, I really don't think there's a proper pronunciation for that, Acurante Movebo, because it's like, it's Latin, so it's really weird.
Yeah, Acurante Movebo.
Acurante Movebo.
Yeah.
So actually, that was a very interesting point when I was singing it, when I was recording that part specifically Acurante Movebo. I was very afraid of. I'm like, am I going to say this right? Am I going to screw this up completely? I gave it a shot. Marcelo liked it, and for me, it's like, okay, Marcelo liked it. That's fine. I think it's going to sound good. But yeah, I mean, I think that every song has its own, even though it's on a plot of sorts. Like we have a concept, you can look at each song individually, and everyone can take their own meaning for each song, which is one of the most beautiful things about music, is that you can take something from any artist, any band, and you can make it your own in a way, Mm-hmm. And we will never take that away from anyone that listens to our work, because that is exactly one of the reasons why music exists. It allows you to explore your feelings, to explore your moods, in many different ways. And I hope that our music, even though it's, heavy and tense, and in many ways sullen, apart from the name of the band, but I hope that it gives hope to people. It gives like an escape pod for people to wander in, reflect about their life, or a specific moment they're going through, or even to rejoice. Maybe I can speak for myself. I love melancholy, which is kind of weird. I love to be happy, but there is also a part of me that loves to feel bad, which is weird.
That's not weird at all. I totally understand. Like, there's something about like during the greatest moments, I think we as humans are always searching for the greatest imperfections in life. So I think it's only human nature that even in the best of times, we always try to point out all the things that piss us off.
That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's why I find myself listening to very, very sad music most of the time, especially orchestral music, which I love. And it's interesting and weird because Marcelo knows me. I'm quite a positive and fun guy. Like, I'm very soft and I like to make jokes about everything. But there is another side of me that it's like, oh my God, the heaviness of life gets on my shoulders and I'm gonna die. And it's really weird.
But I think I also can relate to that. So I feel like I'm a really positive person, but usually when I think about my expression, my musical and artistic expression, I think you can picture something like looking through your window, at a gray sky, when it's always like that moody kind of vibe, gray kind of vibe with a soft, like subtle rain, where that bunch of clouds some light rays from the sun like peering over, that kind of approach is more or less something that I could like with what I could create, like something some kind of analogy, to our music and to my expression, towards art itself. And it's like David said, I think our lyrical concepts express a lot of things that everyone can relate to. I think you can pick one song from this album, for example, and try to envision yourself like going through something like that. For example, for David, I think the most relatable song would be for that time period, for that specific time period, would be like Acaronta Mavebo, for sure. For me, it's Memento, because Memento expresses it's like a almost not literal, but a conceptual expression of a part of my life that I lived through, with this kind of analogy to you as a human being in this society having to wear some kind of mask, to get in touch with everyone, to feel good with everyone in every department, in every occasion, even if it means listening to things that you cannot relate to and feeling things that you don't like. But you have to go through it, you have to live your life, you have to surpass it. So you need that kind of mask to adapt. Like, because I during a lot of years I felt like some kind of chameleon, in society, when I have to work with some kind of people, but I don't relate with them. But my professional activity depends on that, my personal relations depend on that. So I have to adapt to everything, and Memento kind of describes that feeling,
And what an appropriate time to then be releasing an album of this concept in 2021. I think you were saving it for the perfect time, because I think really it does have an essence of like representing the times that we're in and the positive and negative aspects that could come out of it. And it's great that you're also able to use a concept that has been expressed before, but tie in your own personal elements into it. And I have two more questions for you, but kind of like going back into this concept, the concept of light and darkness has been expressed through just about not even just every form of music, but just every form of art in general. Like, I mean, it's been expressed in philosophy, it's been expressed in literature, it's been expressed in visual art. Why do you feel that maybe like the style of the music that Sullen plays best supports this concept?
That's a very good question. As Marcelo is the main composer for the band, I would give him this little bit of word.
Putting him on the spot.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I normally approach our music like that, just almost like if you're looking into some the more dark artistic kinds of expression, you know, like the paintings of Goya, the paintings of some like I don't know, like Polish artists or something like that, people that usually gone through a lot, H.R. Giger too, you know, and you try to find beauty in that darkness, you know. So I like that contrast between worlds, even in a reality that we live in, and that, as we know, you always get this kind of clash between good and evil, but usually the good, the typical good, the good that society gives to you is full of bad stuff, you know, and the reverse, the bad stuff usually cannot be that bad. I know sometimes there's a lot of stuff that goes through and it's really tough. But even so, I think you can find some light in darkness, and that's what I try to do when I approach the more extreme side of music. You know, in my approach to Sullen's musical composition, you know, try to bring that kind of I don't know. I think that kind of appreciation for the dark side of music, it's really important. Almost like Opeth, you know, Opeth has a lot of beautiful stuff that sound like really gloomy, really sullen.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
yeah. What's great is like, and you know what's funny is like metalheads are often looked at as like, you know, very negative people, where, you know, judging by every single interview I've done in my life, they're anything but. Metalheads are some of the most positive people you'll encounter, but they do express in their art subject matter that is unsettling, subject matter that is eerie. They use a sound and a composition to express that said eerie element. So like it's really that kind of, and I believe I said this in the review, but if I didn't, I'll just say it now. That's what I really think that Act I Oblivion is. It is the beauty of darkness. It's the beauty of despair. It's taking something that people find uncomfortable and people want to avoid and hope that nobody has to go through, and making people find comfort in it. I think that this is an album to make people find comfort in the greatest times, or make people find comfort in the hardest times, while also being a very fun listen for the greatest times.
Yeah.
Wow, that really sums the record, to be frankly. Thank you so much for that a little bit there. It's really, exactly that. Because I think that as just going back a little bit to the earlier question, I think that what really defines an artist, regardless of the area he or she is working in, I think we are very much sensitive people. Everyone is sensitive, of course, but if you use art to express your sensitivities as a human being, you know, your soul, your thoughts, your mindset and everything, it really is interesting, because I think in my case specifically, I always use my sorrow or, you know, my depressive states sometimes to create, and sometimes that's the only reason why I create. You know, speaking about talking about music that I've made earlier, most of my triggers, if we can say so, was actually pain and you know, rough times. So I think that in art in general, a lot of artists out there use their own pain and their own, you know, the way that they look at sadness or depression or darkness, as you said, I think they use it. We are actually able to pinpoint certain aspects of it, transform them into music or paintings or books or movies or video games even, or any other kind of art, even actors, for example. If you take close look to some performances, you can see that some key moments of specific scenes where the actor has to cry or has to do something that's very emotional. If the actor is really good, you are actually convinced that he's going through that, he or she. It's like, wow, this is amazing. It doesn't shatter your belief in what's happening on the screen, even if it's a sci-fi movie of sorts. So I think that's a very key element, is that artists in general are very much connected with their emotional side. And that is the fuel for many of the compositions. Of course, some other artists have a different mindset, and they work specifically with goals in mind, like they have a concept and, okay, I got this idea, I'm going to work on this. But a lot of it comes from the heart, it comes from the soul. It really comes from deep within. I'm not going to talk about love songs or anything like that, but even those come from happy places. I think being an artist is really juggling between the light and darkness and finding, the best out of both worlds. And like you said, and I really appreciated what you said about, finding beauty in darkness. That was really, now I'm thinking about it, and it really is one of the main aspects of this record, because it is dark. It is something that is quite obscure in a way. But like you said as well, and I think it's very important to retain that, there is hope in here. It's not something, it's not a record to, I'm going to use a very bad expression, to slide your wrists with or something like that. But it's really a very reflective album, I think. There is a lot of pain, there's a lot of agony and despair, but the way that we try to bring it has a light into it, which is quite a paradoxical thing, but interesting, I think.
It's cool because I think people have to grow to appreciate these two sides of life. As I told before to David, some of my most brutal lyrical moments came from me writing on my desk on those beautiful days, sunny days with birds chirping outside. I was looking throughout my window oh man, what a beautiful, beautiful day outside. And I was writing about death and that kind of stuff. So I think we can grow to appreciate this kind of stuff. We have tons and tons of bands that do it beautifully. There are also bands that can cross over this kind of paradigms. For example, one band that I'm a real true fan of, called Extol from Norway. And Extol is a Christian metal band, that play a fusion between death and black metal, something like that, with a very progressive approach to it, and they talk about their relation to Christianity, to God. And the music and the concepts, the way they write, it's beautiful. You don't have to believe in that kind of stuff, they're just perspectives.
Absolutely.
Perspectives of art, of life, whatever.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love a lot of Christian music. I love, Skillet or Red. They're very Christian-driven bands. But I'll also listen to Watain and Behemoth. So I think the melody and the music has its own meaning, and the lyrics could also have its own meaning. But when combined together, and it could also work out very great.
Yeah, I mean, it's all open to interpretation, and that's the beauty of it. It's that you can pick up any band with any record. I mean, of course, some records are very much specific, like concept records, it just came to my mind, Metropolis Part 2 from Dream Theater. Now, that is a specific thing. It's a story that they're telling. Mm-hmm. But if you're not telling a particular story, you can actually navigate through the many different meanings that one particular song can have. A song for me can mean like, oh, it's a happy day, and for you it can mean like, oh my dear, this is really bad, and stuff like that. So, and that's really very, very nice that everyone can have their own idea or can associate a song to their own feelings or to their own phase that they're going through, and that's amazing, man. It's part of being human, and I really love that.
To me, the three bands that I think really have done it the best, where they have concepts behind their albums, like a story that you could follow, but like are open enough to the point where people could relate to it. I think Fear Factory did it very well. I mean, Demanufacture is a story.
Amazing record. Yeah.
And yep. Mastodon is another great example of a band that, like, they have historical references, but they also tie their personal lives into it. Like Crack the Sky was written about like Russian history and Rasputin, but it was also about Brown Dahler's sister who passed away. Emperor of Sand has its own historical concept, but it's related to Bill's mother who passed away. And then another great example, kind of an apples and oranges, is My Chemical Romance. I mean, they have concepts behind all of their albums, but they're fucking great, relatable, hard-hitting rock songs that represented at the time. So I really think in the end, you don't want to be enslaved by the concept. You don't want the concept to tell you that this is what the record is and you're wrong if it's anything else. But you also want to make the record compelling enough to the point where the listener would want to engage with it as well. And that's what I also ultimately think that you guys did with this album.
Awesome. That's really, really amazing to hear. Because
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah. My internet. See, the Wi-Fi isn't working all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
So before we go, I want to thank you all so much for your time today, and thanks for such a great conversation and a great interview. Is there just anything else with Sullen that you would like to promote? Like maybe one day when this godforsaken pandemic is over, you could maybe bring Sullen to the States one day?
Actually, Alex, before we go, I would like to just pick up a very brief thing. You mentioned something interesting actually a few minutes ago. You said that it would be a kind of like the perfect timing to release this record in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. And the curious thing is, actually it is, because when we started to write all of this, all the lyrics and everything, and we got the record done, it was before the pandemic hit. Of course some things were done afterwards, but the main concept and lyrics were done before that period. And it's interesting now, because if you listen to the record, you can actually feel like it's almost a narration of someone losing their mind in the middle of this social distancing and, isolation and stuff like that. It almost kind of like is an unofficial soundtrack to the pandemic, which is weird.
There's a lot of bands that released albums last year that have 10 times more context just because of what, like Heaven Shall Burn, their last album, it was a double album, like recorded between 2018 and 19. You listen to that album, it's like lyric for lyric. It was like they were predicting this whole thing. I think we need to stop listening to the scientists now and start listening to the bands, because they're ahead of their time. Fellow metal bands are prophets and nobody's even acknowledging them.
Or video game producers, if you go
The Last of Us, right?
Or do you know Deus Ex games?
No.
If you go back to the first Deus Ex game, just watch the intro for the first game from 2000, and you'll see it's almost like a depiction of what's happening nowadays. It's so surreal, man.
The first album...
Elon must commented on that. Yeah. Also,
the first album I listened to right when the lockdown was imposed was the soundtrack from The Last of Us. So,
oh man, that I didn't play the game because I don't have a PS, but I listened to the soundtrack. I love soundtracks, and sometimes I browse and listen to different composers, and then it's really beautiful. It's really touching.
Yeah. Is there just anything else with Sullen that you would like to promote in terms of like, maybe can you bring this band to the States one day when this pandemic is finally behind us? And I could easily...
I really want to go to the States.
I could honestly see you on a tour with like Neobliviscaris or Caligula's Horse or Allegion or Wilderun, a lot of like progressive bands that are leading the scene very well.
I think we're really looking forward to that. I just hope that everything works out fine with the promoters, maybe with a label behind us. I don't know if for this particular album we're gonna achieve that. Let's see how everything unfolds. But it would be really cool to tour a lot with American bands. You have one band that you mentioned during the review that I'm like a huge fan of, and I can really relate to everything they do. That's called The Contortionists, and I would give everything to play with them.
Oh,
So
that
I
would
do
be-
like a small tour or something like that would be amazing.
That would be a great
Amazing,
tour.
yeah.
That would be a great tour, and it's a bucket list interview for this channel too. So let's hope you do that tour, and I can finally interview the Contortionist on that tour. That would be great.
We all take a great picture together, you know, Sullen's
Yeah,
Contortionist and you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the Contortionist is going to be like, what's so big about this interview?
yeah,
Just did the full circle.
Yeah.
the full circle, yeah.
Yeah. But thank you all so much, everybody. We are here with Sullen. For God's sakes, if you are a prog metal fan, be sure to check out their brand new album, Nodus Tollens Act I, Oblivion. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time.